Following Israel's breaking of the ceasefire in Gaza, there has been a shift in the dynamics and in the defense strategy of the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian resistance was delaying direct combat against the Israeli forces inside of the Gaza Strip, despite Israel going deeper into Gazan territories and actually claiming that it's looking to control these territories. The Israeli foreign minister threatened Hamas and the Palestinians in general, the global population, that more territories will be lost unless they expel the Palestinian resistance and submit to the Israeli demands. Now, the Palestinian resistance, and I spoke about this in one of the previous videos, they have a dynamic way of defending themselves inside of the Gaza Strip. So in certain periods previously, there were periods where there was actually not a lot of action coming from the Palestinian resistance, depending on the timing, the location, the operations that were happening from the Israeli army of terror inside of the Gaza Strip. However, the longer that this is getting delayed, the Israeli presence or the lack of reaching to a ceasefire. There are talks, but no agreement has been reached yet. And we will speak about the developments in relation to the ceasefire and the problems that are happening now, increasing day by day. Clearly, there's been a decision made by the Palestinian resistance to start attacking. But before they started attacking, they are clearly now implementing a strategy inside of the Gaza Strip where they are actively luring the Israeli soldiers into certain areas, making them feel comfortable and established without any feeling of threat necessarily against them, up until they seize the moment and find the right time to attack them. They've done that previously many times, but previously there were more activities in multiple other parts too, and there was no declaration about a ceasefire. There's another notion that the Palestinian resistance is assuming that this is a period that will end relatively soon, relatively quickly. But now clearly they are having these attacks against Israel with two significant attacks. The previous attack that we spoke about several days back was an ambush, and over a dozen Israelis were killed or wounded in that attack. Now they had an attack against 3 Merkava tanks. 3 Merkava tanks today inside of the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian resistance, in particular, Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas. They were the ones who targeted them with, again, a Yasin 105. We're seeing a return of the Yasin 105, the RPG that was modified and was manufactured by the Palestinian resistance, that targeted over 1,200 machinery, equipment, tanks, and bulldozers of the terror army of Israel. Many of the Israeli tanks out of service completely. They cannot function anymore. Many more tanks, they can hardly find any replacement. The United States now is helping them with some of the parts. There were reports that the United States actually delivered a shipment that was received today by Israel that included bombs, over 1-ton bombs, again, bunker busters, to be used against who exactly? To be used against children in hospitals. That's what they're using it against. What's happening? Sending them bunker busters. Well, everything is still operational in Gaza. I mean, if you want to talk about the resistance, who are the Israel using it against? The people. Bakeries, hospitals, schools, shelters, tents, whatever they feel like, under any pretext under the sun. But back to the attack. So this wasn't the only attack. So they roasted 3 Merkava tanks with child murderers inside them. Usually each Merkava tank, it has about 4, genocidal maniacs inside it. And they targeted 3 today. That's only Al-Qassam brigades. On the other hand, the armed wing of the PIJ, they targeted the Netzarim line with missiles too. The Netzarim line, Israel is back in some parts of Netzarim, the area that they controlled in the central parts of Gaza. And the armed wing of the PIJ, Al-Quds brigades, they targeted them with multiple rockets, missiles. Okay, what does that tell you? What does that say exactly? Well, it's saying a couple of things. Number one, if the Palestinian resistance, as part of its tactic or as part of its strategy or dynamic strategy of defense in Gaza, decided that they temporarily weren't actually attacking the Israeli soldiers inside of Gaza, but rather, for example, launching missiles on Israel, on certain bases in Israel too, assuming that Netanyahu might go back to a ceasefire agreement. Well, that clearly isn't working. That clearly isn't happening. And now they are having more attacks against Israel. And not necessarily just the ambushes, direct confrontation. So usually when you talk about a Yasin 105 missile, you're talking about a missile that, well, they need to use it, the RPG, they need to use it with them. Someone needs to hold it, and someone is going out and they're confronting and they are attacking. Okay. This means that there is an escalation happening inside of the Gaza Strip, despite Benjamin Netanyahu now not reaching an agreement, still not reaching any breakthrough. He is not giving the negotiating delegation any mandates. The only development that happened on the front of the negotiations today was that Benjamin Netanyahu had phone security consultations with some of the other members of the government or relevant bodies, relevant figures in the Israeli security establishment to do with a potential ceasefire. When is that all coming? When is this development happening? These security consultations, all of this, talk, it's coming. It's more reports coming from Israel that it's not only a problem. The people refusing to serve in the Israeli army, it's not just a problem. It's the biggest crisis in the history of the state of Israel. So there was one report on Plus 972 magazine. The Israel army is facing its biggest refusal crisis in decades. They're saying in decades, it's not in decades, it's ever. Israel never had this level of crisis. And in this report, they're saying over 100,000 Israelis have reportedly stopped showing up for reserve duty. While their reasons differ, the scale demonstrates the war's waning legitimacy. This is something massive. Over 100,000 stopped showing up. That means some of those who did not even declare that they do not want to serve in Israel are ridiculing the army now. They're looking as if it's something ridiculous. Not showing up completely, not listening to anyone, and treating the army as if it's like a side job that they're not really interested in or that they don't really need. Alongside more reports that this letter and more petitions are happening in Israel, growing to tens of thousands now, tenfolding almost each day, with Benjamin Netanyahu facing an unprecedented crisis. However, the big problem is Benjamin Netanyahu is still in power. And Benjamin Netanyahu's main aim is to remain in power. Netanyahu's aim isn't victory, isn't to get back the Israeli prisoners of war, isn't even eliminating Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu's main aim is to remain in power. That's why he has multiple fronts open at the same time, so that if one front de-escalates, he can escalate another front. Now, the main front is Gaza. However, he wants he has other, of course, fronts open, but he wants Gaza to remain open for as long as possible. And he doesn't care about victory. He doesn't care about people. And as a matter of fact, he doesn't care about the protests. And he doesn't care about the people refusing to serve. None of that matters to Benjamin Netanyahu. And the severity of the problems that Israel is facing now isn't even something that's bothering him. What's bothering him is only his position, his trial, his excuses, him running away from justice, finding excuses not to go to court hearings, and stay in his position without anyone bothering him up until the next election. So he wants to promote himself as the new Ben Gurion. He wants to hope, or he is striving to actually to expel Palestinians from Gaza. If he succeeds, unlikely, but if he succeeds, he will show himself to everyone in Israel as if he was the second person to expel that many Palestinians all at once, after the Nakba in 1948 and the Naksa in 1967, where in total over 1 million Palestinians were expelled, 750,000 in 1948, approximately 350,000 in 1967. So we're talking about 1.1 million approximately in total. If he manages to expel several hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza, he will show himself as if he is the person who saved Israel forever. Now, all of that is secondary to his interests. Therefore, that is not really affecting him. He's meeting, as a matter of fact, there were reports that he met with some of the families of the prisoners of war. Mind you, these would be the families of the prisoners of war who are aligned with him, because there are those who are for the war, and there are those who are for like ending the war, from the families of the prisoners of war who are held in Gaza. The majority want to stop it, but there are some of them who are heavily aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu, and they just want to continue. They are calling him to have more attacks against, the Palestinian resistance, not allow any aid in. And guess what? Some of the Israeli families of the prisoners of war, they were witnessing the Israeli forces torturing Palestinian prisoners in Jerusalem, who the Israeli forces claimed were members of those who conducted the attack of the 7th of October. False claims, of course, because Israel, they kidnapped thousands of Gazans. And one of the Palestinians who was kidnapped and released, he described his torture story. I spoke about him in a video a couple of weeks ago. And in his video, apart from the unbelievable things they faced during that period of time, he said that they were torturing them in front of families of prisoners of war. Imagine, so they were looking at them being beaten, being humiliated, every single torture you can think of, and having fun. So there are some families of prisoners of war in Gaza who are like that. So Netanyahu met with them to try and show that, no, not everyone is against me. No, there are some who are with me. And he has people who are with him, of course. There is a cult following for him who will, of course, follow him and whatever he does. But the majority, they want to end the war, regardless, again, of their position on the genocide in general, or the position of Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel as a state towards the Palestinians.